to the Security Spotlight podcast. My name is Max Robidoux from the Security Portfolio Marketing team here at Dell Technologies. I'm excited to be bringing you this intro episode to our podcast. Joining me today is my co-host, Steve Kenniston. Steve, do you want to give a quick introduction for our audience?
Yeah, sure thing, Max. How you doing? Thank you. My name is Steve Kenniston. I'm also a member of the Portfolio Marketing Group here in dealing with cybersecurity here at Dell Technologies, also known as the Storage Alchemist, and you can find me on Twitter at @skenniston. I too am looking forward to enlightening our listeners about some interesting topics around cybersecurity. So let's get going, Max.
All right, great. And before we get going, I want to just do a quick plug for what this podcast is. So we're going to have a bi-weekly cadence here. We're going to have a different security topic with a different security expert on. So this one being the first episode here, we're hoping to just kind of talk about the current landscape and the current security situation that we're in. So Steve, I'm going to dive right into it. So as we know, cyber attacks, they continue to rise, and as they continue to rise, the stakes do as well. So if you're reading it and you look at the news, you can see, pretty much a different attack every day or a new threat that's coming out. So a lot of this can seem really overwhelming, just given the sheer quantity of data and how many attacks are happening. And if you look out there online, or you really go to look to see, what can I do to kind of remedy this? There's so many different options or solution choices, even vendors offering their approaches or different solutions they have to security. So oftentimes it's really hard to know where to start. So let's dive right in and give the customers a couple pieces of advice. What's one thing that our listeners or customers can do today in order to start improving their security posture?
Yeah, great setup, Max. I think it's important. I think a lot of folks are going to know, how do I begin? Where do I get started? And, I try to avoid the very first step being the technology step, right? It's one thing to try to make sure as a customer, you kind of have your house in order and are prepared to deal with what an attack might look like, including the recovery of that attack, right? You want to be able to protect against it, but you also need to be able to recover from it and feel confident you're going to get the business back to operational. My kind of non-technology starter kind of toolkit for customers is to talk about a few of the key components, which is number one, when you look at your data set, right, do you look at classifying the information or the data that you have in your environment, whether it be the data or the applications? Because when you understand what is most critical to the business, when you start setting up recovery plans, right, you kind of know where to begin, what to get back the fastest to make sure the business stays operational. Another key component is really designing your environment, not necessarily for protection or backup, but designing it for recovery. So a lot of tools and capabilities these days allow you to back up a petabyte of data in an evening, right? That's great, but you can't really recover that much data in one fell swoop. So are you set up and architected properly to be able to recover the data that's going to make you operational again as quickly as possible? And are you using the right tools, and do you understand the right data sets that you have to be able to do that? The next two kind of go hand in hand, and it's you can consider them one or consider them two. One is you want to automate where it's practical, right? Any place you can automate what's happening, especially from a recovery standpoint, or getting the business back to operational, is really powerful. And what goes along with that is the practicing of that recovery, or the practicing of getting your business back to operational. And automation can help that practicing, right? So think about snapshotting capabilities within storage these days, or within your backups, to be able to do fast recoveries, almost near instantaneous. You don't have to spend the weekend doing, full disaster recovery testing. You can kind of test an environment, make sure it's running, get it back to operational. Because I like to use the analogy, like, why do you practice so much? It's just kind of the same reasons why the military practices so much. When an attack or an event does happen, a lot of the things that you're going to have to do, you want to be second nature and to just happen. But when surprises happen, like often do in cyber threats, right, you're going to need a little bit more brain power to kind of focus on, okay, this is different than I expected. How do I address that? You're going to want to have those cycles free to be able to do that and keep moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I like that analogy quite a bit, actually. And And you mentioned you don't like touching on the technology aspect, but I think that was a really good setup for. I'm going to talk about the technology aspect a little bit here. So one concept that I want to touch on that I think is somewhat related to what you're talking about is this idea of security debt. And I really like this term, and I heard it from a blog that Bobby Stempley wrote for our Dell Perspectives page. And the concept is basically the idea that the current landscape is full of this technology that's being rapidly produced without building security into the foundation of the product or the solution. So leaders in the field have kind of been pushing this shift left programs where you're looking at, building security in, making it intrinsic to a lot of these products and not bolting it on retroactively. So I think this is a really good concept, and it kind of allows us to say, Dell's doing something fairly similar with this, where with our technology presence throughout the infrastructure we're looking at, both IT domains across the globe, we're in a really good position to be able to offer our customers a holistic vision for security. So not only kind of the practices that you were talking about, but looking kind of more towards features, we're looking at embedding features intrinsically into some of these platforms, into endpoints, hardening a lot of these processes to be inherently secure, and providing some of these managed and professional security services that are able to help customers not only with that technology, but with some of the practices that you were talking about there. Cool. So we touched on protection a little bit. I want to switch our focus over to the resiliency aspect of it. So we know that protection, it's not bulletproof. You're not going to stop all the breaches. You need to have a strong resiliency plan in place. And what we kind of view resilience here is it's a complement to protection, or it's this, two sides to the same coin. Um, so we know that in a cyber resilient mindset, this focus shifts from defending against an attack to recovering from one with minimal disruption and loss. And could you go into that a little bit more and talk about like why and how we should be able to change this mindset?
Yeah, sure. I think it's really important. I like the way you frame that, the two sides of this same security coin, right? You want to do the protection, but you also want to be able to be resilient and be able to get the business back to operational, as we talked about, right? Ultimately, that's the fundamental objective, right? When something happens, something goes bump in the night, no matter what it is, right? Whether it be fire, flood, natural disaster, or a security attack, right? You've got to be prepared. And so I really like the fact Gartner last year wrote a piece, and they actually updated it in December of this past year, saying you will be hacked, so embrace the breach. So part of it is fundamentally starting with you already have been hacked mindset, right? So you should think about the fact that they're already in your environment. The next component is now I'm going to have to recover from that environment, and that's what I'm going to need to do. So if you think back to what we were talking about around designing for recovery, right? It's looking at tools and capabilities, and I also like Bobby's piece that she put up about setting up resilience, making components intrinsic into the products or solutions that you buy. First, there are so many technology vendors out there offering their little widget that's going to solve a problem. Ultimately, you got to take a step back and say, wait a minute, I can put that here, but then I still have these holes here, or it solves this problem here, but it doesn't solve that problem there, right? One of the things we're looking at trying to do with Dell, especially around our Project Pacific organization, is throughout our entire infrastructure group, enable a level of consistency among all of them to ensure that, the education and simplicity and training of new people is all in one. It's all inclusive. It's a lot easier to understand. It's a lot easier to manage. So think about a concept like MFA, right? Multi-factor authentication. Having the same multi-factor authentication for different products that are being used within an organization is really key, right? Because then I don't have to learn different ways or different methodologies of how does it get sent to my email? Does it get sent to my phone? Is it multiple characters? Whatever it is, you're consistent in how you do that. So from a learning aspect, it's the same. And then from a training aspect, it's the same. And then what that allows you to do is focus on what are the recovery aspects or the resiliency aspects that you're building into your organization, right? So, you want to focus on network security. Maybe it's network segmentation to build resiliency, to stop that spread that if once the attacker gets in. right? It's reducing that attack surface. It's being prepared to recover your environment when something happens. And what tools am I using, right? So am I using a snapshotting based tool on my storage device? Am I using a snapshotting based tool on my data protection environment, or am I using, just streaming from a backup, right? It's really a function of what that data set is, how quickly I need to get back, and what's the most cost efficient way to be able to do all of that.
Yeah. And, kind of going off what you mentioned a little bit there, I think oftentimes people think of resiliency as just another word for BC or DR.
Right.
And it's really not. It's more this holistic, proactive approach to downtime that really it's not only getting your business back up and running for your customers, but it's also, your organization's brand promise as well to the IT systems up and running again. And I think you were mentioning it there a little bit. It's this focus on having a plan, and that kind of goes back to a little bit what you were mentioning. We were talking about protection of, under the military, you need to have this plan. So again, showing how all these things are kind of related. It's not just enough to just have resilience or just have protection. They're all kind of intermingled as part of this larger plan that we have here. So um, going keep continuing on here a little bit. So we talked about the technology a little bit. Let's shift our focus here a little bit. So security success, it's not just about technology. We've talked about it a couple times here. It's also about the value that a trusted partner can bring to the table. So can you talk a little bit more about what a good partner looks like and how how an organization could benefit from partnering with someone like a Dell that'd be able to help bring them a lot of these additional security benefits?
Certainly. I think the ultimate word when looking at thinking about partnerships, or who the vendors are that you're going to trust, becomes, well, trust is key, but it's also confidence, right? What type of confidence do you have in that partner that can help you do the things that are necessary, especially around security, that are then in turn going to give you the confidence that you need to make sure that when you can get the business up and running in a very quick amount of time and know that the data set is correct, right. So that's kind of two levels of confidence. As we mentioned, there are a ton of security vendors out there, and so Dell takes a moment and we actually think about, first of all, we have, like I just mentioned, the Project Pacific. So we're thinking about how to drive consistency and accuracy among all the solutions that you use in your environment, right? So that's really helping to ease a lot of the burdens that are put upon you, right? I think vendors that are trying to do these kinds of things and help you think more clearly about your security landscape is really paramount, number one.
Mhm.
Number two, Dell has always had a secure supply chain, right? So it's not just a matter of have I bought a system from this vendor, right? Are you confident that the system that showed up is the system that you bought, has all the right pieces in it that you want, that it hasn't been corrupted along the shipping path or something like that? And when you install it, it's just a matter of installing it. It's not a matter of, hey, now I have to troubleshoot and debug before I go through this process, right? So there's another one. Having a secure development lifecycle, that's another key component, right? So one of the other things we do at Dell is when we get a request in from a customer, an enhancement request, which is very, very common, right? Hey, I need this feature to do the job better, right? And it's probably something we want to implement. But before we do the implementation of that, we actually take a step back and look at how does it affect everything else within the ecosystem, and to make sure that when we actually start building and developing capabilities that are going to help enhance that enhancement request, or turn it on, or make features available for customers, and we're not breaking other things that are in your environment. Because the worst thing you can do is, oh, that's great, I've got this great new feature, I install it, and it breaks a whole bunch of other things, especially fundamentally when it comes to security, because that's like one of the major hot buttons these days within IT. So I think having all of those things put in place and thinking about those things, you want to be able to look to your vendors or to your partners and make sure they're thinking as much about you as you are them.
Yeah. And I think the main point there as well is like you don't have to embark on this journey yourself. That's the benefit of these partners. You need this trusted end-to-end partner as a proven record of helping you solve some of these the biggest challenges in order to streamline this path to zero trust. And I think I can't believe it. We got this far into the podcast
I
without,
know.
that was the first mention of zero trust here. So um, we're aware of zero trust. It's going to be something that we're going to dive a little bit deeper to on a future episode. because it deserves an episode, if not multiple episodes, all to itself. So we're aware of it. We're not avoiding the topic on purpose. It's just going to be a future podcast episode for us here. So Steve, I think this has been a really good discussion for us so far. Is there any closing thoughts you want to leave our audience with before we sign off for the first episode here?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we covered a lot. I think, making sure you are, before you actually embark on purchasing any technologies, you're thinking about the planning of what you're going to have to do to ensure that your environment is secure end to end. And that includes things like what you need to do to fall, if you fall into any type of regulated industry, especially. But so it's not just your data to keep the business operational, but what do you need to do to make sure you're compliant, right? Then there's looking at the vendors or the partners that you want to embark on this journey with. Again, Max, I think you said it right. You don't have to do it alone, right? We've heard ad nauseum about the dearth of security expertise in the industry. Don't be afraid of that, right? There are a lot of vendors out there that can help you kind of overcome some of those challenges within your environment. So be looking at vendors who can both help you from that security standpoint, both from an implementation standpoint, but also how they look at their products and solutions to make sure that those are as simple as they can be in your environment, that they're easy to manage, and train on. And that's probably one of the fundamental things we didn't really cover, but the education of the employees, not just, hey, don't click on that phishing email, the direct employees, but are you providing enough space to allow your IT team to kind of grow and become educated on a lot of these solutions so that they can offer up newer, better ideas or be aware of things, so that as you're on your journey, it's an evolution, right? You're constantly evolving and making it better, making it stronger. And again, getting back to that confidence level that you can recover and feel really good about how secure your business is.
Yeah, no, I think that definitely makes a lot of sense. And going back to the confidence level, you just need the trusted partner to help you pull everything together we were talking about. I think that's kind of like the one, if we do a single most compelling idea, that's kind of what I'd pull out of our things today. But Steve, thanks again for the first of many podcasts that we have to come here. Everyone who's listening, please like, subscribe to our podcast, The Security Spotlight. If you'd like to know more about our Dell's security portfolio, please visit us at dell.com/security solutions. We look forward to bringing you more episodes of security, hopefully some zero trust in the near future here. And Steve, thanks again.
No, my pleasure, Max. This was great. Thanks.